Shalom, shalom. So for this video, it involves a little bit of YouTube history. And it's so weird watching old videos because, well, for someone like me, I associate them with VHS home movies. But of course, that's a very different world at a different time. So it can feel very strange. And there are videos on YouTube now that are as old as I was when I first started watching them, which is so weird. I actually remember thinking, going back over 15 years now, seeing a video and thinking, what is it going to be like when eventually I see the date posted for this video be much more time than what it currently says. So instead of saying posted a few days ago, it's going to say posted something like 10 years ago, which is going to feel so weird. And definitely, I think I was right to have thought that back then. Because at this point, YouTube is not just a social media platform to get updates. It's a living archive of people's lives. It's a documentation of a rise and fall of many eras and personalities. So seeing someone like Emily, or well, now she's known as Em, but she was known as Emmy at the time, way back then, cycling through her various stages of anorexia is interesting because I watched her grow up in a very short amount of time since I watched all of her videos back to back. And I watched her take control of her anorexia and break free of it. It's scary enough to see someone change in real life, like people you grow up with, someone you know now that you knew very differently back then. And it's weirder to see someone change in a short amount of time, even though it was literally over the last decade. But what's nice about Emily is she's done a great job owning up to those changes and showing how she doesn't have to be ashamed of who she was. So Emmy started posting as far back as 2011 when the account was created. The title of her channel was Emmy Lou Makeup, which is such a fun title for that time. There are no videos from 2011. The earliest one right now is from 2012. And the channel started when she was a freshman in high school. And it started out as a very typical teen, beauty, girly fashion channel. So there were makeup tutorials, there were get ready routines, back to school hauls, and vlogs. It was such a nostalgia trip to think back to an era of YouTube with Juicy Couture leggings, Uggs, when Revlon and MAC makeup ruled, and Urban Outfitters was the go-to place. Actually, most nostalgic for me was her mentioning Forever 21 when they actually made good clothes. I mean, yeah, it was always a fast fashion brand, but it wasn't so obvious. In fact, I still have this cardigan from Forever 21 from 2011 from one of their few stores made for men. Is it ever going to come back in style? I actually wonder if I have a picture of myself wearing it from that time. I'll find it. So the first video on her channel, the oldest one that's still active on her channel, is her doing makeup with her sister. And I think this video is just so interesting.
Yeah, go on the other side. She's annoying. She's so cute.
It shows actually a time when teenagers were having a bit of a changing attitude towards makeup and beauty than the previous generation. Because I think this video serves as a good marker for the way teens perceive beauty and body image and the relationship to their looks. Because around the time of early makeup YouTube, teens realized they didn't just have to show off their looks to specifically be attracted to someone or for a specific reason. YouTube could be for anyone, so there wasn't a pressure to like have a specific look. So the content became more about expressing themselves with makeup as an art than being objectively attractive.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Hopefully I won't die. Are you ready for bronzer?
Sure, I didn't know where to play this, so good luck again. Doesn't it bronze?
Rachel likes art.
Which is why people like Emmy and her sister are just having fun with makeup and don't care about the outcome. I just think it's so cute. Right off the bat, I noticed that Emmy had a very humble personality. And let's just face it, in the very early days of makeup YouTube, sorry to bring this up again, I can sound like such an old person. The people who thrived with this kind of content could be accidentally obnoxious a lot of the times, because it was very likely they were from a rich family, had very nicely decorated bedrooms to film in. But not only that, but the teen YouTubers, they were able to build an audience because they were lucky enough to have very decent social lives. They were lucky enough to have friends and go outings, and so they'd have stories to talk about in their videos. Which is a privilege not a lot of teenagers had. So of course there's that privilege of just them happening to be popular in their lives off camera, which helped translate into on-camera content. Emmy was like that, but the curtain kind of is going to fall on that later. Essentially, watching an early 2010s makeup YouTuber was like accidentally being humble bragged to for like 10 minutes. Which, yes, we all loved seeing a good eyeshadow routine, but we also would get jealous. With Emmy, there was none of that. She wasn't trying hard to make everything too pretty. She truly cared about making her viewers feel included and giving them content they would enjoy. So it really did feel like it was about the viewer, not the poster, which was a rarity for the time, and I guess still is. This is why I think she actually gained such a nice following of 10,000 subscribers over the years, with very few videos that were not great effort with editing or anything like that. She actually got partnered with the platform very quickly. And she was very friendly in the comments. Something I should also make clear is I don't think really at any point she looked dangerously unhealthy. You could argue she always looked a little bit underweight, or maybe a decent amount underweight. But that's the thing about anorexia. It's so much harder to catch on teenagers because teens' bodies change in the weirdest ways and can look sick even if they're not sick. Different parts of teens' bodies develop differently. So if a girl gets wide hips and wide shoulders, but the rest of her doesn't grow like her arms and legs, she's gonna look extremely skinny even though her BMI or weight is perfectly fine. The body betrays you in horrible ways as a teenager. In Emmy's life in general, she seemed like things were fine. There were moments she had with friends, and she had like vlogs of her and talking about doing stuff like extracurricular activities.
And it's like 1:30, so we're gonna go do hair. I'm just gonna get it like cut, and then I don't know what would you consider it.
So again, everything just appears extremely normal, and she just seems extremely humble, and she just wants to share her life, not make her life seem super glamorous because to feel like a movie star, which again was a very early purpose of YouTube. Not that there's anything wrong with that though. Fun thing though, her most viewed video is at 200,000 views from 2012. And it's of her with a tutorial on acne using toothpaste, so like a life hack. That video was such a nostalgia trip. It just shows what people used YouTube for back in 2012. I honestly think if I was watching her back then, and I was also her age group, I would have definitely wanted her to be my real friend because, again, she just was totally fine capturing fun little moments and wasn't trying to show off anything, or wasn't trying to make even her channel like a highlight reel. Like there's a funny moment where she pronounces gnocchi as gnocchi, and I just thought that was so funny. Again, just shows how much back then people were looking to YouTube to feel like they had friends, and she filled that purpose very well. I mean, in terms of parasocial relationships, there was just no sense of pretentiousness. And let's face it, we watched fashion and makeup YouTubers because we wanted to see the stuff our parents wouldn't buy us. That wasn't the case with her also. Again, she wanted her content to be genuinely helpful. For example, she has this advice video about being a freshman year in high school because at this point she was already past freshman year. And you can tell she genuinely understands what the concerns students have, and she reassures them saying, it's fine, you got this, don't overthink it. Again, not, I would say, advice that it could only possibly come from somebody very privileged. Like here, again, showing her humbleness in this video, in the description where she's showing off her closet, she writes, note, I know I have a lot of clothes. I know that my closet is probably over the top, but I'm so grateful for everything I have. See, that's like, just shows how humble she is, and she didn't want to come off like she was better than you. In terms of the kind of home she had, well, like I said, she did a lot of extracurricular activities. Swimming was one of them, which is very interesting. She has a video called How She Makes Money. That can seem harsh because her parents were making her work. She talks saying she doesn't get an allowance, she has to work for extra money, but I wouldn't say she at all had like tiger parents because they were fine with having her socialize. They took her shopping and all sorts of trips and stuff. So I think she grew up in a house with a good amount of discipline and responsibility. But I think her working odd jobs outside of school, I don't think that means in this case she's coming from like a very harsh household. She definitely was a high achiever though, because in the comment section talking about her life, she said she took a lot of AP classes, various lessons, was on swimming, and was getting a high GPA. So that's just part of her personality, and definitely I think part of the values of her house. But just keep in mind that she is a naturally very disciplined person. Now we're going into the anorexia. So now it's July 2014, and she would have been past her sophomore year. And this kind of just comes out of nowhere, this video, and what I mean by that is she did not at all indicate there were any problems in her life or had any complaints or hinted at any issues in any of her prior videos. And as I said, her looks didn't completely give it away. Also, what's interesting is later on she would admit that it was the mounting questioning in the comment section of her videos that did push her to address it. But it's interesting because I didn't see any comments in any of those videos.
And today I wanted to film a video that was a little bit more personal than a lot of my videos. As a lot of you know, I was inpatient for an eating disorder for several months this spring and this summer, and I just got home about a week ago. So I've been, adjusting back to a normal life and everything. I've gotten lots of questions on Ask FM, on YouTube, and all those places about eating disorders and what my eating disorder was like.
So she might have deleted some, or more likely, I think there were other videos where there were a lot of comments being concerned for her that she took down. This video actually randomly has the comments locked, so maybe there were comments there asking if her health was fine, that she didn't want to be visible. But I assume that yes, there had to have been a lot of comments at one point. I can't gauge exactly how big the curiosity of whether she had an eating disorder or not was, but it definitely was big enough to push her to talk about it. And the anorexia announcement video is the start of her getting very personal, and again, just randomly out of the blue. So she opens up and just says, yes, she has an eating disorder, and that for a long time her health was in really bad shape. She admitted the body image issues started back in 7th grade.
I had a really hard time in middle school and as well in high school. I've never really felt like I fit in with anyone, which is actually why I kind of started making videos. To go through your day and not have people talk to you, like, that's an awful feeling, let me tell you. So I just felt really bad about myself, and I was like, whatever,
She started dieting because she was in athletics, but it didn't get so bad because her parents had a nutritionist help her with her weight because of the athletics, so that kind of masked it. But the real issue though is her social life.
High school started, and it was really good. At first, I got a lot closer with some people from middle school, and I just felt like I knew people a little bit better. So my confidence had grown, partly from YouTube, partly just from being more happy with myself. That all went great. I was on the swim team and everything. I, went out with boys sometimes, and I had some friends. And then the worst thing was this guy that I really liked. We stopped talking, and I lost my best friend all in like a week or so.
So this is what I find interesting. There are vlogs with her going out with her friends, going to parties and their sports and clubs, because she mentioned she was very active in school activities and outside school activities. And it turns out all this stuff that was giving her a social life was causing issues. And she was really lonely and sad the entire time. And these issues were bad because it was a lot of drama on top of the pre-existing issues of her body image. And she also was struggling to socialize going back to middle school. So yes, high school got a little bit better, and she was technically doing better than middle school, but still the same issues persisted, which were very triggering to the unresolved ones from the previous school. And she talked about resisting food to punish herself for not doing good enough.
I've always loved food. I still love food. I just don't feel like I deserve it. I think having an eating disorder really made it as like a punishment.
And her health, which I don't think her looks would have indicated this, was in such bad shape because she was so cold all the time. She had to have heaters in her room because she was so skinny. She had no fat to keep her warm.
I have heaters in my room because I get so cold. That's not normal.
The beginning of sophomore year was when she realized that it was getting bad. She had to do something about it, and that she was having low self-esteem, in part, again, because her social life was not great. It hadn't really been for a long time. And also she felt she wasn't being a good teenage girl because she had not had a boyfriend yet, and she hadn't had her first kiss at like 15.
I got really unhappy at the beginning of this year just because I kind of realized like, oh shit, like high school is like halfway done and I haven't had a boyfriend, I haven't had my first kiss. I don't think I have that many friends.
Which, okay, I really feel her on that. I really, really, really do. What I mean is, I feel her because I know definitely, I'm sure that's still the case now, that you're not considered a legit teenager or mature or proper for your age unless you've had a relationship, a kiss, or even sex, sorry to say. And that pressure starts even way before 15, or at least in my social world it did, which is sad. So it really makes you feel guilty and that you're actually just a little kid in a teenager's body because you don't deserve to feel like a teenager, which I hate that. I hate how the marker for maturity is just happening to have a kiss or cosplay a romantic relationship when, you know, even at 15 or even older, you don't fully understand everything about relationships. So it just makes her feel so lost and inadequate, even if technically everything else she did is way above the maturity level expected for age. Because like I said, she worked, she hustled, she did activities, she was way more responsible than the average 15-year-old, but she was feeling very down on herself because what's seen as the most important thing she didn't have. And she admitted that she just didn't feel good at anything, even though she was extremely disciplined and was doing so much, which is so sad because it feels like all that discipline to her was just going towards nothing. So then the exercising kicked in. And even though many of her previous videos were morning and night routines that showed her eating, she actually had cut food out a long time ago. And when she tried to stop restricting, she resorted to binging. She also said no one was expressing concern with her at first, which she actually translated that in her mind to, I'm not being skinny enough because no one's worried about me. I need people to be worried about me to validate that I'm skinny.
Because no one ever said anything to me, which kind of made it worse because I was like, oh, people don't think I'm skinny. I, better get even skinnier. In my mind, I knew I had a problem. All I wanted was people to talk to me.
And so when people get worried about her, it shows she's done something right. So she was the one to admit to her parents that she had anorexia, and her parents immediately pulled her out of school and sent her to an inpatient clinic. Her health was so bad, the clinic put her in a wheelchair because they were concerned of her collapsing.
Therapies, you weren't allowed to walk. I was in a wheelchair for a while because they were afraid I was going to, I don't know, can't flush your own toilet, you can't make your bed because it's too much movement.
So she went on to talk about her time in rehab, and she was in an inpatient clinic from April to June and then switched to a partial program. Okay, so that was a lot to unpack there. I understand why that can feel very anticlimactic because essentially the reason for her having such severe anorexia that almost killed her was just being a high school student, an American high school student. And that seems like a big slap in the face, especially to people who had it much worse than her. Because someone who had no friends and wasn't actually doing anything to socialize and didn't have some activity to cling to could feel like they're getting slapped in the face. Because yeah, you could argue having some friends is better than none, even if there's some horrible bullshit to put up with. I do, yes, think that she did have it a lot better than other people who went through very severe bullying and never had any friends or anyone to rely on or even a nice family. But I also still feel for her because having codependent, toxic friendships can be such a nightmare and can really make you question your self-esteem without you realizing it because you don't see a reason to, because technically speaking, you have friends and you're popular, so what can there be to complain about? Even though there is a lot to complain about, but it's harder to acknowledge when you're on the inside of it. And then you don't want to lose them because, you don't want to betray your former self or how you thought, and you don't want to then suddenly have them turn on you more than they might already are. And socializing can be very much like a sport. If you don't do it for a while, you can get bad at it. So then there's the whole issue of trying to make new friends, which is a whole other ballgame there. I think overall, like I said, how can just being an American teenager, putting up with American teenager problems, cause her such a horrible illness? That's just it though, because everything it takes to be seen as a healthy American teenager with a decent life turned on her.
I'm not good at anything. That is just what I was thinking. I really started pushing the exercise and I was like, I'll get healthy. And I was really healthy and I really enjoyed that for a while. Then, this winter, it just all blew up. I would work out for a couple of hours a day, walk 2 miles on top of that before I went to bed.
all the accomplishments and milestones she was supposed to hit and didn't give the reward that was expected, which made her feel like a failure, even though this was not her fault. It's like being stuck in a car driving down a road, you realize it's the wrong road, but you can't steer it. And again, she was always very disciplined, as I said. So anything she did, she put her mind to it and accomplished it. So to have all that work put in, only then to realize that, one, it didn't resolve the issues she developed way back in middle school. It made some of those issues worse, and there was no way to change her situation otherwise than by making it worse. That is just a massive thing to deal with. And of course, it can manifest in the form of some kind of self-harm. Like, going back to what I said about the dating thing, to be seen as a proper healthy teenager, you have to hit certain milestones. And she didn't hit that milestone that she was supposed to get, even though she did so many other things that really I think she should have been proud of but couldn't be because they weren't seen as the most important thing. So to her, her life just felt like a scam, which is really sad. It's a good thing she got into recovery. Her anorexia would not be mentioned for a while. I mean, school was the problem, but she also did continue on with school. She did go back to school. Well, she did also say she was changing schools, so I don't know if maybe the bullying had something to do with it or not. She briefly readdressed her eating disorder in September of 2014, so I think the beginning of her junior year, I think it is. But it was just briefly mentioned. She readdressed the eating disorder full on. It's like this artsy narration video, like a stance against hating yourself.
Tell you what to eat and what you shouldn't eat, even blocking entire foods out of schools.
It would also be the beginning of her entry into body positivity, though she wouldn't be super vocal about it. And she would then continue on with her normal average life. And even though her fan base remained small, like I said, she maxed out at 10,000 subscribers. She was still getting a good amount of views per video because her community was so positive and so invested in her. And she talked about how she loved being a YouTuber and how she invested a lot of money in her channel. She was making money off of it, but putting more money into it. And time goes by soon, and it's 2016, and she's off to college. The content continues, like room tours, organization tours, get readies, all that stuff. Actually, college was a good time for her channel. The views, I think, picked back up. So now it's 2016, and 2 years have gone by since she spoke about her anorexia. And for the very first time since her initial announcement video, she goes deep into what was going on with her. And this actually video is the second most viewed on her channel at about 100,000 views. It's another artsy like narration video on like an art piece on like what it's like to have anorexic thoughts.
And that cup of fruit, surely that bowl was mislabeled. It is way bigger than 1 cup. It should say a pint for good measure. You've got to eat less than everyone else. Restricting is the only thing you're good at, when you actually do it, of course. You are your eating disorder. It is your hobby, your talent, your idea.
Which I don't think there was much of this content around on the platform at the time, which is why I think it has so much views, even though it's a short video. But then another year passes, and then she does another video on anorexia about her identity outside of an eating disorder. This is another standard advice video, and she emphasizes you don't need to label yourself as recovered in order to not be controlled by your eating disorder anymore. And she talks about the intention behind recovery is so much more important than the actual goal of hitting a goal weight to gain, which I think is nice advice. Over time, she does ease into more anorexia recovery content. The third most viewed video on her channel is like a behind the scenes of her posting, actually, of like how she prepares her videos. I think this kind of content also wouldn't become later popular until like a year later in 2018, because that's when we all started getting tired of Instagram culture. And now she's getting close to her senior year. In one of her videos talking about her eating disorder, she did admit that in her senior year of high school, she was still getting like kind of quasi treatment for her eating disorder, which is why the uploading slowed down for a while.
Came home, switched high schools, loved my second high school, and then I was in school again until fall of my senior year. I went back to treatment again, and then I started up school again in the spring for spring semester.
And she also admitted even in her freshman year of college, she was still struggling with anorexia. And she did get malnourished again, and her eating disorder brain came back in full force. She talks about how when she gets that way, she cannot make decisions for herself, so it's very difficult to manage day-by-day struggles, which I think is very interesting, having anorexia and then losing cognitive abilities to be able to do the most basic things. Even if you do seem functional, and like talkative and can carry a conversation. She emphasizes that when she was this way in her freshman year of college, she only wanted to interact with just her eating disorder and nobody else.
And so then I was home, and then I made it through my freshman year of college, which was this past year, until April, when it all went really downhill. I was struggling a lot with depression, just feeling very isolated and very alone, very hopeless. The only coping skill I really had with me going into college was my eating disorder. When I get malnourished, I'm really unable to make decisions for myself. It messes with me psychologically in a way that I can't relate to at the current moment because I'm not in that place. But if I let myself get to the point where my anxiety and depression are amplified like that.
Which again kind of betrays the videos at the time, which were like dorm tours, and there were some other people in her videos. But like I said, she was never like a daily vlogger. She was going to therapy, but she stopped because anorexia thrives in isolation. So it is mirroring the issues she had in her freshman year of high school. She actually took pictures of how bad it got, which, wow. And that she talked about how she feels high when she doesn't drink, so when she's parked. So like her freshman year of high school, in her freshman year, looking back now at her freshman year of college, she had to go to the emergency room. I think she didn't want to post it at the time it was happening because she didn't want to talk about it until she knew for sure she was better, to show what recovery looks like, since at this point she was and thrives and she wanted to show her thriving. But she was still in recovery this entire time. She had to have a feeding tube put back in, and she admitted that her anorexic brain loved the feeding tube because it proved how sick she was and that she had hit rock bottom, because that's what she says anorexia is about, wanting to hit rock bottom. It's like this double logic of like trying to recover is an excuse to get sicker because people are interested in how sick you are. She definitely describes how anorexia can be like almost this shadow brain controlling your body. So you have your regular thoughts that are watching a shadow brain take control of your body that are separate thoughts you don't necessarily recognize or don't see as a threat, but are not necessarily what you see yourself as thinking. And she said even in her treatment, she managed to throw out food. So she then eventually transitioned to a day program. Later on in later videos, talked about how getting more into body positivity she hinted it was helping her recover more. Like she talked about, don't think of fat as a feeling at all. You don't feel fat. And don't appropriate fat as an identity because then it's going to trigger the anorexic brain. And body positivity and her loving her major as a nursing student was ultimately what helped her pull out of the anorexic thoughts and recover again. But nursing school definitely takes a toll. It's a hard major, and she took some more time off uploading. And when she came back to her channel, she became more of a wellness advocate, as well as, doing school and internships. Like, no, she actually said being a wellness advocate was one of her jobs on the college campus, among her internships and other odd jobs. But again, finding her passion for nursing helped distract her from the anorexia. At this point, it's getting close to 2019 and she's close to finishing. Instead of about anorexia recovery, her channel now has become like a wellness channel about emphasizing self-love.
And I kind of accepted the fact that like so many eyes were on me that I couldn't go back to what I had been doing previously. New Year's 2019, I stopped purging cold turkey. I have not purged since 2019 and I have no desire to. I never really wanted to when I was doing it either. It just felt like the only way I could get out of my own head. Process of going through recovery is still like very much a part of me and why I do what I do now. But there's so much more to life. Like I know so much about nutrition. I know so much about my own body. And at some point I just had to stop talking the talk and like start walking the walk.
She graduates nursing school into the beginning of COVID, which what a way to graduate. The updates are less frequent, but they're very much full of heart. She mass uploaded a lot in April of 2020, I think to help touch base with her fans since times were really tough. She was in therapy this entire time, and again, her discipline to anorexia could also apply to discipline to recovery because she stayed devoted. Like therapy with all the other stuff going on, nursing and her various jobs, and YouTube, wow. And she talked about setting herself goals to make every day better. Like for her, building healthy habits, it doesn't get rid of anorexia right away, but it is the stepping stones to building a healthy identity once those habits become ingrained and you feel comfortable with them. So you could say definitely at this point she was more like very much a motivational coach. Again, though, similar to how when she was posting seemingly innocent videos, she actually wasn't doing well. Like first in her freshman, she was posting in her freshman year of high school, and then later on, a year later, she admit, oh God, she was almost to death. She was posting, fun videos freshman year of college, and then a year later, she'd admit, oh, things were bad. Well, she admits in 2018, again, when she was kind of taking some time off from YouTube, but was working to recover and talking about recovery, she was suffering from bulimia. Like, she had recovered from anorexia a lot at that point, like she said. So her earlier videos about recovery during college, they weren't a lie, but it wasn't complete, which I don't think she was lying because, again, she never said she was fully recovered and was done. And that's it. The 2020 was the last time she posted, but I'm sure she's happy being a nurse and making sure her community is healthy as much as she wants to be. But we're not done yet, because just because I'm done with her channel doesn't mean I'm done with her, because how I actually found out about her was a guest blog post on a website called adolescent.net, like a teen advice website. And she talked in these blog posts way more in depth about the troubles she was having. I don't think it was because she was lying. I just think because it wasn't fitting with the brand of her channel. So this was a good place to get much, much more explicit. So going back to the troubles with dating and feeling guilty about not having a boyfriend, in high school she did eventually get a boyfriend, and she admitted that in one of the blog posts that it was a very abusive relationship. I actually think I saw him in one of her prom videos. And in this post about how dating someone violent impacted her views on sexuality, it's not eating disorder related, but I do think this very much can relate to eating disorders and self-esteem. I found myself unable to truly connect with anyone else romantically. Logically, I wanted to love other people. I could go through the motions of loving someone, but because I had mastered the skill of disassociation, the closer any male seemed to get to me, the further I seemed to go from myself. Eventually, the constant disassociation made it impossible for me to connect to anyone around me. So I'd leave a relationship seemingly out of the blue or sabotage it to give them a reason to leave first. 2 years after leaving my abuser, I decided I was asexual. I still desired monogamous relationships and knew intimacy was one of my core values, but emotional, intellectual, and spiritual forms of intimacy felt like the only ones I could ever grasp. Sexual intimacy felt like a form of self-harm. One night, I met a boy and we developed an unexpected friendship. He had no idea that I thought I was asexual when we met. We had fun together. He treated me the same in private as he did when we went to parties. I found myself opening my heart again, even though I hadn't entered with the intention of doing so, and we started dating. Eventually, physical intimacy seemed like the next natural step. There was no reason for him to believe sex was something I didn't want. It was a slow process. He always asked before we did anything. And while he had no idea what I'd gone through, he never questioned me when I told him no, or not now. Throughout our relationship, I was able to stay connected to reality in a way that kept my heart and body feeling open rather than closed. When I did feel the need to physically leave to be in my own space, he never begged me to stay, although I know he didn't want me to go. He respected my choice even if he couldn't understand it. The longer the relationship went, the easier being physically intimate became. I still felt scared, but I was also curious and appreciative. Over time, the physical aspect of our relationship seemed to help me feel more connected to him, and it was an insanely healing experience for me. Eventually, our relationship ended. It was at this point that I finally acknowledged and labeled the experiences I had in my first relationship as abusive. I realized that I'm not asexual and that perhaps my aversion to sexual intimacy was a byproduct of the trauma I faced, not an inherent part of my identity. And then she talked more about therapy and addressing her mental health, which again I think is related to the anorexia. But as time progressed, I found that I kept hitting plateaus in my mental health. Soon the appointments themselves felt futile. Even switching therapists and treatments didn't help. I sat through sessions as if they were some sort of punishment. I used my diagnosis as some sort of self-pitying name tag, a way to separate myself from the rest of humanity. Perhaps the biggest reason why I needed to leave therapy was that I'd lost motivation to take responsibility for my own actions. Because of this, I started using therapy as an excuse to look for ugly things in the world, and since I remained unmotivated to change the way I perceived it, I kept feeding my own isolation and self-hatred. I essentially defined myself as being terminally mentally ill. And so after those 7 years of talk therapy, I switched to working with the life coach. While life coaches aren't typically mental health professionals, mine was able to support my well-being in a way that drastically improved my mental health. She had me define my core values: passion, empathy, connection, integrity, and appreciation. Using those values, she had me daydream about my future. Unlike therapy, which focused more on my past, life coaching made me focus on the future. By cultivating curiosity and actually pushing myself to try new things, I got a better idea of what I like and what I don't. I think what's good is she understood the traps in recovery that people fall through, and so she didn't just act like recovery was just the shell to inhabit for a while until the anorexia could take over again. And she understood is that she wasn't going to magically recover. I don't think being in college also made her magically recover, but I do think her love for her major gave her a new confidence that helped beat the anorexia and pulled her out of the anorexia even when she relapsed. Eventually, the honeymoon phase began to wear. I watched as my peers formed friend groups while I stood in my corner of the universe, frozen in fear as a strange new reality unfolded before my eyes. I didn't attend any meetings for the clubs I signed up for. I moved monotonously from class to class. I refused to let myself engage in the pleasures of college because I didn't have a perfect 4.0. The boy who I was seeing chose to date another girl. Within weeks, I felt completely empty. I essentially lost all motivation to live. That fall, I relapsed into my eating disorder, prompting my body to shrink along with any remnants of my personality. I lost my passion for things I previously identified with, being on the varsity swim team, friendships, my flourishing YouTube career, my dream of joining Nurses Without Borders. Instead, I began to identify the emptiness I felt on the inside and the act of manipulating my outer appearance to match it. After deciding to go through sorority recruitment for the second time, I discovered just how extroverted I truly was. And later, I was elected president of my class. I started doing bi-weekly wellness club meetings, which grew my interest in health promotion and wellness. I started dating someone in my new friend group. We broke up during finals, but my parents put their foot down and told me if I wasn't going to take recovery seriously, they would have no choice but to stop financially supporting my education. It took a couple more cycles of relapsing and going to treatment before I realized that if everyone around me was so adamant that my physical body live, I needed to keep every piece of me alive. And so I made a deep-seated commitment to myself that no matter what challenges I faced, no matter how much pain I felt, I was going to do whatever it took to remain alive. Along the way, I'm discovering who I am, what I like, what I don't, and what I can contribute to the world. I realize now that most of the rejections and broken relationships I faced weren't really about rejecting me. It was more along the lines of, thank you for letting me see you, I appreciate who you are, and someone will love and cherish you, but for whatever reason, that person cannot be me. I think even though she lost her confidence, which caused her anorexia, she always had ways to gain it back through a great support group, and her determination and kind heart. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me what you think of her long journey, and take care.